Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now when it comes to entry level hardware, you can't get much more entry level than the GT 710, but it's easy to forget that Nvidia's low end offering had a predecessor, and that was this. This is the GT 610, and while I'm sure some YouTube channels have decided to end the year with a bang, I decided to mark the end of what is probably one of the worst years in human history with a slight and disappointing fizzle. If an end of year no holds barred high budget video spectacular is a firework, then our look at this passively called part is a damp sparkler. A damp sparkler that I've tried to light with a wet match. Welcome to the last video of 2020. So the GT 610 has been around since 2012, and considering the 710 didn't become available until 2016, this super budget option dominated the very low spec space for a good few years, and don't get me wrong, much like its successor, it was and still is okay for basic everyday usage. You slap one of these in any office system with onboard Intel GMA graphics, and not only do you get better graphical performance with this card, but you also get an HDMI port, something that a lot of older machines' motherboards don't have. This card, you'll be pleased to know, also has DirectX 11, so a lot of newer games will actually run, though driver support for the card ended in March of 2018. So, just what can we do with this 2GB DDR3 based GPU? Let's find out. So, the first game we tried was 2007's Crysis, and unfortunately medium settings proves a little too much for this GPU, and with that it was time to switch to the low preset. Now with the low settings we are guaranteed over 30 frames per second. Now you may be wondering what that little orange spinning thing is in the bottom left corner, and that is the indication that we're recording internally with MSI Afterburner. Sometimes when using these older cards I record internally because it's less hassle than setting up a capture card which might have compatibility issues, but I can say now that there is pretty much no difference with the gameplay that you're seeing on screen while recording and while not recording. Recording with MSI Afterburner relies mainly on CPU power. We have plenty of that, and it really doesn't hinder the average or percentile figures in any way when using this card, or so I've found out from previous tests and this test itself. So Fallout 4 is a game that I haven't played in a very long time, and when using the GT 610 I was experiencing this weird glitch where I couldn't move off the spot. It's probably for the best because as we ventured deeper into Concord, the frame rates got a lot worse. Here we were seeing about 10 FPS. For these games, or for a couple of games I should say, I didn't record the average and percentile figures. This is true for Fallout 4 and Red Dead Redemption because the frame rate is so bad that I can't possibly call it playable in any sense of the word, and therefore the average frame rates don't really matter. When you're getting 10 FPS, it's not going to be a decent experience anyway, so yeah, the average frame rates are sort of irrelevant. Now, Fortnite, thanks to its new performance mode, if you don't know, performance mode is a new rendering method that you can use under the API options. You've got DirectX 11, DirectX 12, and this new performance setting. If you choose performance, then you can actually make use of a preset that sets the graphics even lower than you'd expect with the lowest preset, and thankfully with this performance mode we're actually able to meet and exceed our 30 FPS expectation here. When using these lower end cards I always have a 30 FPS target in mind, and luckily with Fortnite at 720p and the performance mode we were able to exceed that. So yeah, the game doesn't run too badly. It doesn't look very good, I'll admit, it doesn't look very good at all, but it is somewhat playable if you don't mind 30 frames per second, and even in some rare instances you may see 60 FPS. Of course we're still going to see drops below 30 though, and I should mention that because in an online competitive title such as Fortnite, where the more frames you get the better, that could be a pretty big hindrance. Now rather embarrassingly, I forgot for a long while that Grand Theft Auto 5 had a resolution scale option. In the past I've set this game to 720p low, not seen very good frame rates, and then totally written off the hardware that I've been testing. I think I was watching a Zworms gaming video the other day where he used the resolution scaling option, and I just thought, hang on, Where on earth has that come from? I think I've used the option before, but I totally forgot it existed. And I'm glad I watched that video because I was reminded that I could set the resolution scale to less than 100% in the advanced options, which is pretty much necessary for the GT610 here if you want to hit 30 FPS on average. At 720p low with 100% resolution scaling, you're going to be seeing around 23-24 FPS, but if you drop that ever so slightly to 0.75% resolution scaling, then we are going to average around 30. There are still some drops here and there. This is sort of akin to playing the PlayStation 3 version, for example, but even that version looks a little better visually anyway. Okay, so just like in Fallout 4, I didn't bother with the average and percentile figures in Red Dead Redemption 2. This is running at about 360p, 50% of 720p, so yeah, 360p here. As you can see, the game doesn't look brilliant. It is running, which was quite surprising. We're using about 1.4 gigabytes of our 2 gigabyte GT610 here, and yeah, anywhere between 5 and 10 FPS is the standard for this GPU. Look at the i5 not really being utilised at all here. In fact, usage sometimes dropped as low as 2%, which I found quite amusing, but it is unrealistic, of course, to pair this card with a CPU like the i5. It just means that we can really see what these cards are capable of when they're not being held back in any way by the processor. Watch Dogs Legion got as far as this and then crashed. I thought that was briefly worth a mention. Skyrim was the last game that we tested, and actually it ran okay with at least 30 frames per second. We are using low, once again with 720p, and we averaged just over 30 frames per second. So I would consider this playable to some degree. If you are playing in first person, then 30 FPS isn't ideal. I prefer to play 60 FPS, to be honest, in first person games. With a 610, that's not going to be possible. It still did better than I thought it would do here, but look at that frame time graph. We are seeing some stutters, especially when we get into combat, and the settings were actually set so low that the enemies at first were non-existent. I kept seeing the red blips on the HUD at the top of the screen, and I was like, well, there are no enemies. Where are these red dots coming from? And as I made my way closer to the enemies, they just sort of popped in out of nowhere, so that could be seen as quite inconvenient, to be honest. But yeah, another sacrifice we have to make really in order to achieve 30 FPS. You could probably increase that draw distance a little bit, to be honest, and still see very similar frame rates. What matters here with the 610 is that the settings overall are set to low and the anti-aliasing is turned off, because that will cripple the frame rate. But there we go, the GT610, the successor, or sorry, predecessor to the GT710, just when you thought graphics cards couldn't get any worse. Seriously though, the 610 when it came out, it was a decent entry level card if you just wanted something basic, something with an HDMI port. This MSI passive version is even better because it makes no noise in operation, so it's perfect for office environments, and it's also ideal if you just want something super cheap and you hate noise coming from your PC like I do. So there we go, the GT610, what a way to round off the year, taking a look pretty much at a graphics card that sort of defines this channel in a way. I don't mean terrible, I mean a low-end card, you know, sort of embodies everything that this channel is about, checking out more budget-oriented hardware, and I hope you guys have enjoyed watching the videos, not just this year, but all the time. I hope you can continue to join me in 2021 when we're going to continue taking a look at lower end hardware, of course, mixing it up a bit with the occasional higher end stuff. We've done that a few times, you know, we've checked out the 3070 a couple of times on this channel, the 1080 Ti, but as we do move into 2021, a lot of the cards that are currently still quite expensive are going to drop again in price, I think. So yeah, and a lot of these older cards that we've tested, say, a couple of years ago, I think are finally going to meet their maker. I think 750 Ti in 2021, that's going to be interesting, to say the least. That might finally be the year when we have to say goodbye. But as always, I hope you can join me in the next video. If you enjoyed this one, leave a like on it down below. Leave a dislike if you didn't. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Have a very happy new year. Maybe it's already 2021 where you are, in which case, hello from the past. And yeah, I'll see you all in the next one. Thank you so much for watching.